What happens when a simple Tennessee farmer loses everything and turns into the deadliest sniper the Civil War ever faced? The bloodiest sniper of the Civil War wasn't a soldier. He wasn't a hero. He was Jack Hinson, a grieving father, a Tennessee landowner pushed beyond the brink by an atrocity history tried to erase. While names like Grant and Sherman dominated the headlines, Jack Hinson, armed with a custom .50 caliber rifle, stalked Union forces with such deadly precision that he quietly rewrote the rules of warfare. His rifle still bears the notches of over 100 kills, yet somehow, his name almost vanished from the history books. Why? Because Jack Hinson's story exposes a side of war they never teach you, a story of vengeance, terror, and the echoes of gunfire that lingered long after the final battle at Appomattox. Before we dive deeper into this remarkable story, take a moment to like and subscribe. Your support helps us bring to light the hidden corners of history, the tales that textbooks often overlook, and the voices that time nearly silenced. By joining our community, you help us keep these stories alive for future generations. When the Civil War erupted in 1861, Jack Hinson was not a soldier or a politician. He was a prosperous plantation owner in Stewart County, Tennessee, a region nestled between the winding Cumberland and Tennessee rivers. His life was rooted in the rhythms of the land, the changing seasons, and the close-knit bonds of family and community. This area, known as the land between the rivers, was more than just a scenic stretch of countryside. It was a vital crossroads. As the armies of North and South drew ever closer, Jack's world teetered on the edge of chaos. He had one hope: to remain neutral, to protect his land from the devastation of war, and above all, to shield his family from the violence that threatened to engulf them. Jack was too old to fight, but the war's shadow loomed over his home. He pleaded with his sons, urging them to stay out of the conflict, to resist the call to arms that swept through their community. But the pull of duty, pride, and youthful conviction was too strong for one of his sons, who defied his father's wishes and joined the Confederate ranks, leaving home with a heavy heart and uncertain future. That single decision would set in motion a chain of events that would forever alter the Henson family's fate and Jack's own destiny. The rivers that flowed past Jack's fields were no longer just part of the landscape. They became vital lifelines for both the Union and the Confederacy, carrying troops, supplies, and the hopes of entire armies. Union generals understood that whoever controlled these waterways could choke off their enemies' resources and movement. Ulysses S. Grant, determined and relentless, set his sights on two key strongholds, Fort Henry and the mighty Fort Donelson, both just a stone's throw from Jack Hinson's peaceful fields. Fort Henry, poorly defended and vulnerable to the rising river, fell quickly to Union forces, signaling a dramatic shift in control of the region. But Fort Donelson was a different story. For 3 brutal days, soldiers on both sides endured freezing temperatures, relentless cannon fire, and hand-to-hand combat before the battered fort finally surrendered to Grant's army. The world Jack Hinson had known, peaceful, predictable, and rooted in tradition, was now shattered. His home sat in the crosshairs of a grinding war machine, and nothing would ever be the same. Union soldiers soon occupied the area, patrolling the roads and watching the locals with wary, suspicious eyes. For a time they left Jack and his family alone, but the uneasy peace would not last for long. But war doesn't stay at arm's length for long. As Confederate guerrillas, bushwhackers, began ambushing Union patrols near Jack's farm, Union patience snapped. A brutal no-quarter order followed. Any suspected guerrilla was to be executed on sight. One fateful autumn morning, Jack's 2 sons, just 17 and 21, set out to hunt. They never returned. Intercepted by Union soldiers, they were falsely accused of being bushwhackers and executed without trial. But it didn't end there. Their severed heads were brought back, mounted on the family's front gate, a message in blood, a monument to cruelty. Jack Hinson, the peaceful farmer, died that day too. The man who had once cherished the quiet rhythms of the land, who had built a life from the soil and the seasons, was gone. In his place, something colder, harder, and infinitely more dangerous began to stir. The grief that hollowed him out also forged him into something new, a man with nothing left to lose. Jack had wealth, he had connections, he was respected, even envied among his neighbors. But now, all those things felt hollow. The world he'd known had been shattered, and the only thing that remained was a burning need for justice, or perhaps revenge. The darkness that was born in him that day would not be easily extinguished. And now, he had a mission. Every step he took was driven by a single, relentless purpose: he would not rest until those responsible for his son's deaths paid the price. He commissioned a master gunsmith to create a weapon unlike any other, a custom .50 caliber long rifle, built for one purpose: vengeance. This was not just a tool, but a symbol of his resolve. The craftsman poured weeks of labor into the rifle, knowing it would become an instrument of legend. Jack trained relentlessly, perfecting the art of death at a distance. Day after day he practiced in the woods, learning to move silently, to blend with the shadows, to steady his aim even as his hands trembled with rage and sorrow. He began his hunt with cold, surgical precision, targeting the very men who had murdered his sons. He watched, he waited, and when the moment was right, he struck without mercy. One by one they fell. Jack never stopped. Each shot was a message, echoing through the hills and hollows. A father's grief turned into relentless retribution. He knew their patrol routes, he knew their habits. He studied their movements, memorized their routines, and anticipated their every step. And he struck with terrifying accuracy. His legend grew with every shot, whispered among soldiers who feared the ghost in the woods. But even as Jack operated in the shadows, the Union grew suspicious. They raided his home, they arrested neighbors. Fear and suspicion spread through the countryside, and no one felt safe. Finally, they torched Bubbling Springs plantation to the ground, ignoring the pleas of the freedmen Jack had quietly emancipated. The flames devoured everything he had built, erasing the last traces of his old life. All Jack could do was watch, hidden in the woods, as the last remnants of his old life burned to ash. Alone in the darkness, he became a legend, a ghost haunting the Cumberland, driven by loss and vengeance. From that moment forward, Jack was a ghost. He built a hideout in a cave overlooking the river's bottleneck, a perfect natural ambush site. Union supply ships had no choice but to slow as they passed, and when they did, Jack's vengeance rained from the cliffs. With each shot, an officer fell. Each pull of the trigger etched another mark into his rifle. A grim tally of a father's wrath made flesh. Locals whispered about him. Union soldiers feared him. They called him the Ghost of the Cumberland. Jack became an army of one, living only to make the Union bleed. He survived by the kindness of sympathizers and occasional secret visits to his surviving family. But always, he returned to the cave. Always, he returned to the hunt. Even after the war ended at Appomattox, and the nation tried to stitch itself back together, some wounds refused to heal. For Jack Hinson, the war was never truly over. The battles that raged inside him outlasted the gunfire and the headlines. He slipped quietly into the shadows of post-war Tennessee, a man marked by loss and vengeance, blending into the land he knew so well. Henson ran a humble grain mill and general store, serving neighbors who whispered his name with a mix of fear and respect. But he always kept watch, his eyes scanning the horizon, never certain if the next knock at the door would bring trouble from the past. Old enemies never forgot the ghost who had hunted them, and the price on his head lingered long after the last shot was fired. Jack Hinson died in 1905, not on a battlefield but in the quiet of a Tennessee town, far from the chaos that had defined his life. The world moved on, but the stories about him lingered in the streets and fields he once walked. His legendary rifle, scored with more than 100 kill marks, still exists, a chilling artifact of a man's relentless quest for justice, or perhaps revenge. It stands as silent testimony to a man who refused to let history bury his son's screams, a reminder that some wounds echo through generations. Was Jack Hinson a hero, a monster, or something far more complicated, a man shaped by tragedy, forced to choose between forgiveness and fury? Or simply a father who turned grief into something no army could contain, a force as unstoppable as the river itself? The Union burned his home, leaving only ashes and memories behind. The Confederacy lost the West, and with it, the dreams of many who called the Cumberland home. But Jack Hinson's shadow still haunts the rivers where blood once flowed, where the past refuses to stay buried. We celebrate Grant's victories. But who writes the rules when grief becomes a weapon, and a single man's pain can change the course of history? When one man becomes an entire army's nightmare, the line between justice and vengeance blurs, and legends are born in the darkness. Somewhere, in the fading echoes of the Cumberland, the ghost still waits. His story a haunting reminder of the cost of war and the power of memory. Thanks for watching. If this story moved you, or made you see the Civil War in a different light, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more true hidden histories. Until next time, stay curious.